Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, teaching your kids about the dangers of intersections. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. In the studio, as he is every Friday, Tony Joe's here to talk about car-related questions that you might have and give you a few answers. So if you'd like to talk to Tony Joe, the number to call is 1-877-913-5357. 1-877-913-5357. If you've got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send a question in. We will get you taken care of. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5337. Tony Joe, how's it going?
Well, I'm a little bit excited about the upcoming football season. Not to mention any names, I'll just mention the undefeated Dallas Cowboys. And you can't argue with that, and you know it. So this is my time to shine. I enjoy saying that this time of the year.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. Of course, it's too hot to be football season. Almost, it should be cooling down. But we got a lot more of this to come.
You know, I know your kids are not playing anymore, but both your boys played high school football. Mm-hmm. And this is, I heard last night, I think, on the news or somewhere, boy, they're really going to try to push these games back an hour to let the sun set a little bit more and let the temperature drop a little bit.
Even then, it's still going to be 102, 103.
And, you know, the thing is that a lot of folks don't realize the players, the young healthy kids that have been playing in this heat, practicing in this heat, hydrating, you know, they've got a rigorous hydration schedule, and they have to do it. It's the fans that suffer. You know, you think about the fans. They get in their air-conditioned car, they go to air-conditioned work, they come home.
Right.
Going out there to watch, be proud of their kids, and they're really supporting them, and they stand out there to support their children, and they're out there playing 102 degrees.
Of course, you've noticed also that when you go to stadiums, it's arranged to where the the fans sit in the shade, and then the visitor side gets all the sun. Because I used to work every game on the chain gang, and that sun would just come boiling down.
Well, listen, Bob, you would expect nothing less. I mean, of course the visitors got to sit over there in the sun.
That's pretty funny. The dynamics of high school football.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, this is the first year that I don't have any child playing
So you're not going to run the chains this year?
No, not going to, unless I get invited to.
You know, one more thing, and then we'll get to business here. But I remember when I first moved down here, Bob, they used to draw. To me, this was absolutely phenomenal. They used to draw, like Highland Park was a big school then. Highland Park and somebody else would be playing, and they'd draw 60,000 fans to a high school football game. And I used to think, I don't think we had 600 fans at a high school football game, and that was a big game.
Oh, then you've got Allen's. I think it's Allen's Stadium. That's for $60 million, or McKinney. One of them is $60 million. I think I got that right.
I don't know. It's a lot of money. Yeah.
So here's a quick quiz for you before we get to the real stuff.
Okay.
What professional football player starts in the NFL that went to Highland Park High School?
Stafford.
Yeah, good job. I didn't know that you'd know that.
Oh, everybody knows that.
1-877-913-5357. They're going, will you please talk about something else? Oh, like what we're supposed to be talking about, which is cars and the problems that they create. Now, we've been starting a series, and we're just going to give a couple of tips a program. But, you know, you get to that age where your kids are able to drive. And boy, you take inventory of what did I teach them? Did I teach them enough? Did I say the right things? Did I emphasize the right things? Because they're going to get off in that car and drive off, and all you can do is pray for their safety as they go wherever they're going. So I think the one thing that always put a little bit of fear in me for my kids, and I'm also extremely aware of it when I'm driving, is intersections. Because intersections are where I would imagine, just guessing, that's where the vast majority of wrecks happen. And it's just because somebody ran a red light, and you had a green light, but you went too quick. You didn't stop to make sure you were ultra clear. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about how you would emphasize that to a 16-year-old.
Yeah, intersections, just by the sheer numbers, do the math. You got on a thoroughfare at 45 miles an hour, you're going all the same way on the same side of the road. Everybody's traveling. Wrecks can occur, of course, changing lanes, not being careful. But intersections are especially dramatic because you've got oncoming traffic all converging in different directions. So you got four different directions that vehicles are coming together. And, of course, the traffic lights control that situation. But the lights at an intersection can be, I mean, that's, of course, we need those lights. There's no question about that. But, for instance, Bob, when the light turns green, and, you know, we try our best to target the younger folks. We're not talking about the 55-year-old people that have been driving for 40 years. I'm talking about the young people. The word that we need to get out is, you know, there's a lot of things that can happen at an intersection, even though you are in the right. That's why you have to be the defensive driver that it requires to maintain safety for you and that of the people in your vehicle. Light turns green, you have every right to go. Nobody's going to argue with that. And a young person is looking at the light, they see it turns green, they want to go, they step on the gas, and they proceed. That does not mean the guy coming the other way is necessarily going to stop for that red light. Or maybe it's a yellow light. Maybe it's right on that cutting edge of, can I make it or not, through this intersection. Right. And you, being the defensive person, have to actually make sure, even though the light did turn green, look both ways. Make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do, because that's the whole idea behind defensive driving, is you do what you're supposed to do and always be on the lookout to make sure everybody else is doing what they're supposed to do, because if they're not, then you have to make up for their mistake. Yeah, they made a mistake, maybe not intentionally. You got to be the one ready to stop or turn or avoid an accident. And that's the way it's going to be forever. Defensive driving. Remember that word, because that's the whole gist of being a safe driver.
Yeah, I mean, of course, my oldest, who debates everything, you tell him that, and he goes, yeah, but I was right. Mm-hmm. And it's not about being right.
Right.
You can be right and you can be really wrong. Mm-hmm. No, you're right when the light turns green and you hold off and you look both ways and you double check. Who cares if they're honking behind you or whatever? You don't feel rushed. You double check. It doesn't take 2 seconds to do it, to make sure that somebody is not being wrong.
Have you ever actually seen someone just blow a red light right in front of you?
Oh yeah,
isn't that?
I mean, you're almost about to pull out, and you don't. And,
okay.
And yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, think about this. Now, isn't that almost surreal that you look at that and you go, I can't believe that person just did that, having no regard for life or liberty, life or for any of the surrounding people. How irresponsible. Well, there's this intersection near me, and I will tell you that I've seen it happen often, and it really makes me wonder why they don't do something about it. Because when you're traveling west at about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and that sun is setting, it makes it almost impossible to see the colors on that traffic light. You can't tell whether it's red, yellow, or green. I've done it. I've come down there, and I've actually come from that direction, and almost got too close to be able to stop if that was red. Hopefully it's green, and I'd get up there and kind of slow down just in case, and it was green. But it is difficult when you're traveling westbound in the early evening at this time of the year. So this is what I'm trying to convey to the younger people, just to give them an idea of just one thing that I can think of. And there's many, but you're sitting at a light. The guy coming from the east, traveling west, may not always be able to see that light. He's looking, and he doesn't see that it's red, so he intends on going. Well, when you get close enough, you realize you can't see any of the colors because that sun is like blinding you going west. So, that's something young people need to understand is watch out. That guy may not run that red light on purpose, but he may, in fact, run that red light. And you don't want to be in the middle of the intersection when he does, even though you had the right to go. Yes, we're not going to argue that. But would you rather be safe, or would you rather be involved in a T-bone at an intersection from somebody blowing a red light? Yeah. And these are the things that you got to stress to kids that are just learning how to drive.
Yeah, and I think that the only effective way to do it is just repetition, driving them crazy. Every time you pull up to a light, when they're still riding with you as a passenger.
Yes, and our parents tried to teach us all, but it's impossible. As you know, Bob, like the software being written for the electric driverless cars, it's impossible to recreate every situation. It's just impossible.
1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. We'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
Dr. Charles Stanley.
No one else is the source of peace but Almighty God. He's the source of peace. He created us to love us and to be loved by us. He created to have fellowship with us, to be good to us, to provide for us, to preserve us.
The teaching of Dr. Charles Stanley on In Touch, helping you grow in Christ every day.
In Touch, weekdays at 12:30, here on KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory and the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9, right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. That is the number to call. And we'd love to hear from you today. If you've got a question and or a comment, the number to call is 1-877-913-5357. I did have a question about, you got to assume that there's I don't know, would have no idea what the temperature of the road is. Well, what kind of effect when you have day after day in driving of 104 to 108 degrees on your tires as it hits that hot asphalt, and then plus the heat that it stirs up just in normal day driving?
Okay, so your question is what happens to the tires?
Right.
Okay. Well, for instance, let's just look at this for a minute. You're driving on concrete, and the concrete, of course, is exposed to sunlight all day long, so it's going to heat up. We all know that. You can see the waves of heat coming off the road. Really, asphalt, concrete, it doesn't matter. But if you heat up the air inside of a tire, it's going to increase the pressure in the tire. So if your pressure is supposed to be 32 psi and you heat that tire air up somehow, and how? Well, you're going to heat it up naturally just by driving down the road. As the hot surface hits the rubber tire, it's going to transfer the heat inside to the air inside the tire, and it will, of course, increase the pressure. Now, when the pressure increases in a tire, Bob, just visualize with me for a minute. If you think about a tire, the treads of a tire being flat on the road, I don't mean a flat tire, but I mean laying across the road surface parallel to the surface. So every part is equally touching the road surface. That's what's supposed to happen when you have the tire properly aired up, or the proper tire pressure. Well, if you increase the pressure in the tire, it's like overfilling it. What's going to happen is the outer edges of the tire are going to lift up off the road a little bit, and only the center part of the tire, or some of the center part of the tire, depending on how much air you have in that tire, is going to be hitting the road. So what will wear is the center portions of the tread as opposed to the outside portions of the tread. You with me?
Right, sure.
Okay. So that does not happen to a great degree in most cases. However, it does happen. And it happens more and more as the August months continue and the day-to-day concrete is heated up, and then at night when it cools down a little bit, it releases some of that heat, and then it gets hot the next day. And really asphalt, that's the worst. Asphalt, that black asphalt surface is really, really hot, and that stuff will cause the tire to do more of what we just described than concrete will. But it happens on all road surfaces. So, well, what happens if, let's just say you overinflate the tire? Well, you're going to wear out the center portion of the tire more. It is not a bad idea just to check the tires once in a while. A lot of gauges on the vehicles now, a lot of the automatic readouts for tire pressure will, if you push the right combinations of buttons, you can see each tire and what the inflation is on each tire. And I don't know that it really, if it's not more than 2 or 3 pounds either way, I don't know that I would take the time to adjust it, simply because when the weather cools down, everything will get back to its normal condition. But if you're seeing 10 psi over the rated amount, then, yeah, you're going to have to adjust the air pressure a little bit. And then if it cools down, the air pressure goes low, you're going to have to fill it back up. I haven't seen that to a great deal of giving a great deal of problems, but theoretically, you're asking me what happens. Well, that is exactly what happens.
1-877-913-5357. I had a question come in that I'm sure that this is a very common question, but something that if it happens to you, you just kind of don't know where to turn to. So the scenario is a 2-year-old battery and having trouble starting the car, not turning over, nothing.
Okay.
At what point do you, when you're talking about a 2-year battery, do you rule out the battery and that it's something like the alternator?
Well, if you have a 2-year-old battery, then you tend to think of it like this, Bob. It's probably not the battery. If the battery's only 2 years old, chances are you got dirty battery terminals, bad contacts, bad grounds, bad starter. Something else is wrong. Now, if you're asking me when do you suspect the alternator, that's something that would have to be tested at a shop somewhere. You can use the gauge on your dashboard, and if you're really good at using your gauges and checking them, you would have known the alternator wasn't charging a while ago. In other words, it's not reading on the gauge where it should be reading, and I suspect something's wrong, so maybe I better have that checked. If it gets to the point where the car just won't start, then you're going to probably have to have some involvement with a mechanic to help you at that point, because I've seen defective batteries. Of course, you can have a bad battery at 2 years old. Anything can be manufactured with defects and not live its normal lifespan. But more than likely, 2-year-old battery, I would say it's probably something other than the battery. However, that's not necessarily true in 100% of the cases. You do have defective batteries out there.
So if you ruled out the battery, where would you go next?
Well, I'd turn on the headlights and see if I've got any power to anything,
Right.
A lot of people, let me just say this, a lot of people will call me and say, well, all the lights on the dash are coming on. Yeah, all the lights on the dash maybe take a total of 3 amps to run all those.
Right.
It takes 300 amps to turn your car over, maybe more than that. So that does not mean the battery is delivering enough power. If you have a dirty terminal, there's potentially a lot of electricity in that battery that wants to get out and do the job. But if the terminals are dirty or you have a bad loose connection somewhere, all that power can't get through that bad connection, so it might as well just stay in the battery, which it does. And this is why you always want to check more than just assume. So you can test the battery, and if the battery shows to be good, you just start the diagnostic procedure of what in the world is going on. It appears this battery's good, yet I can't start the car. Well, start with things like, power to things. Do you have headlights? Do you have windshield wipers? Do you have a radio? Do things like that work? Then you can start from there, and if you still need help at that point, if everything's working, you could, I suppose, jump start the car just to see if that will do any good. But after that, you're just going to have some help, because most people aren't going to have the diagnostic equipment in their garage to check things like that.
So what's the key indicator that it is the alternator and you're going to have to replace the alternator?
Alternators usually have a battery light that lights up, and it's a red insignia showing either BAT or a picture of a battery or a charging system. It'll say, and usually that light will be lit up, as well as some other lights that our computer system will start shutting things down when it doesn't have enough power. That is a pretty good indication that you got an alternator issue. But when you see that happen, you need to go home or get to a place where you can have your car tested, because once the alternator stops working, you're running the air conditioner, the headlights, everything's running on battery power. And like a child's toy, you put the battery in there, and it runs for so long, and then the battery goes dead. You're not recharging that battery.
So what ends up is it possible that, okay, so the scenario you just described, you're driving and you're just wearing down the battery. I mean, do you get down to zero, and what happens to the car if you're driving?
Generally, you'll have drivability symptoms before it gets to the point where it'll quit. I mean, eventually, if you just kept driving it, it would quit. The car would quit. But most people aren't ever going to drive to that point, because they're going to notice things like my signal lights aren't working right, or my radio is gone out, or lights are on warning me of something on the dash, or some symptom. The car just doesn't want to go. I step on it, it just doesn't feel like it wants to get up and go. You're going to notice things. You're going to say, wow, there's something wrong with my car.
Yeah, I would imagine that's never happened to me. So I would imagine that's a pretty scary scenario with you got lights flashing and things, all kinds of things going on at once.
Well, yeah, it's not scary necessarily, but it does. it makes you think, wow, something's wrong. I got to get this
Right.
to a mechanic because I don't know what's going on, but something's not right.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. You have one other thing to say?
Well, I was just going to...
Go ahead.
Something real quick I just wanted to bring up. You know, there was a customer that called me, was on the Highway 190, the Bush Freeway, and she was driving a 2018 car, okay? Doesn't matter what it was because a lot of the electronics equipment now is very complicated, and I wanted to point this out. It said service soon, and we'll go into this next week. It's going to be a little more, but it's really important that I make people understand this.
This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.